There you go. People are just randomly showing up, and we don't actually know who they are and how many yet, but we'll see. Okay, cool. So it sounds like we are live. All right. Well, for those of you joined right on the dot, welcome to Shop Talk Session 2, back by popular demand, and with another star-studded cast here. So really excited to get into the conversation. Based off of our 30-minute prep call, this hour will go by super quick. So I'll make my introduction really quick, but the purpose of Shop Talks is really to hear from peers, right? So enough of the one-way conversations, and we're really trying to foster more of that peer-to-peer conversation in a virtual format, so we can have it more often and more regularly. So the last one we did was last month. It was around what keeps you up at night. About half the questions were around AI. So we figured we might as well just go right at it and have one specifically around AI. And we're going to try to pull off the impossible and have a conversation that has no buzz or hype, and have real people who are doing real things with AI and doing real planning work with organizations to do the talking. So with that, I'd love to introduce our panelists. So for those that don't know me, my name is Ben Preston, I'm co-founder of Gearflow. And with me, we're going to start around the room, but with me, we have David Heppe. So if you want to introduce yourself, David.
Sure. I'm David Heppe with Teichert Construction based in California. We're a heavy civil construction company, have our own fleet of heavy equipment, a lot of Caterpillar equipment, do our own maintenance, and have a large number of off-road trucks and vehicles as well that we maintain. And I'm in our data and technology solutions group. So we support the different businesses. And one of my partners is our mobile equipment division, who's responsible for taking care of all of our mobile equipment, off-road, small equipment, on-road, about 5,000 assets.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining. Eric, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So my name is Eric Yam. I'm the Senior Vice President of Fleet for Primoris Services Corporation. So in my role, I oversee everything fleet management, cradle to grave. That includes facilities, maintenance, buying, selling of assets. We roughly have 24,000 pieces of equipment all over North America, and being a specialty contractor, that ranges from everything from, aero boards, light towers, compressors, crawler cranes, to line equipment and pipe layers. So you name it, we pretty much have it.
Awesome. And ChaChi, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, ChaChi Gallo, Vice President of IT for Michels Construction out of Wisconsin. We have about 18,000 pieces of equipment globally that we manage. We're the equipment team's partner for all the technologies, evaluations, reviews, integrations, all that good stuff. And we are a heavy utilities construction contractor, so we do everything that leads up to construction sites and all the foundational work underneath it.
Awesome. Well, like I said, star-studded cast, people actually doing the real stuff. So, the way this is going to work is we really are trying our best to make this as conversational as possible. So if you guys have questions, drop them into the comments. We can even invite you up on stage to actually participate. So as we go, feel free. There's not going to be like a Q&A time. So we really want you guys to kind of lean in and ask questions that are burning in your mind on the topic of AI and fleet at your organization. So I want to start with you, Eric, and we want to start with the present, like where things stand today. So can you start off by kind of filling us in a little bit about, where is AI actually showing up in fleet operations today at Primoris?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, we're using, the chat engines like Copilot, ChatGPT, but where it's really showing up is in the data. Right. A lot of people want to jump the gun and just start rolling out AI, but really you have to have a strong foundation. You have to have clean data. The data lakes in your data warehouses have to be organized, so you can start using AI in a fashion that it creates a deliverable. Right. We're using it, with a couple softwares that are embedded today We're working with some other partners to actually, grow that and advance that quicker, more. So it's a targeted approach to, our day-to-day practices. But that's, there's a couple projects we have we're working on, Ben, with you, we're working on, a voice agent in the background as well. We're trying to push predictive component replacements within our FMIS system. So there's a lot of things going on, but from a delivery standpoint, really what we're focused on today is data integrity.
Yeah. And can you dig a little deeper? Like, I think getting into like the actual tangible use case. So, the voice agent, that's come up a couple of times, but can you kind of unpack that a little bit more? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the actual ROI you're trying to achieve with that, and how are you approaching it?
Yeah. So really what we're trying to do is maximize our bandwidth of our teams. With the availability of people in the market being so slim, it's just, we have to be able to maximize what we're getting out of our groups today. We have to be able to scale with the same amount of overhead that we're using today. So ideally, customer service is where we're pushing that. So field needs anything, our internal customer needs anything, they can make a phone call. Whether it's repair and maintenance, it's fuel card, just any sort of help. The goal is to have an agent answer the phone and be able to give them, just basic solutions, or allow a point of escalation and them not realize they're not talking to an actual human. And the benefit of that is that now our staff is focused on more actionable, meaningful tasks. And then that voice agent is infinitely scalable. They can be answering and fielding 10, 20 calls at one time when a human only answers once, right? While they're on the phone answering, or through a voice agent or a text agent, while they're answering that email, they could already be placing the orders and delivering. They can multitask in a reasonable fashion, more effective than a human. We all multitask, but really we don't, because we do one task very well, and we just kind of lightly brush or remember kind of what we're doing, in the other screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
We do that a lot with, we're on voice Zoom calls all the time where someone's answering an email, and then, you start talking to them and they're like, oh, wait, I'm not sure what you just said. Can you repeat what you just said? Well, a voice agent would know that, right? That's the whole goal of that.
Yeah. I mean, I love that, because I think you're seeing it as sort of infrastructure to help you guys scale, as opposed to, remove or replace jobs, right? So can you give us a sense of, what's that support look like today? Like, how many people and how many calls are you thinking that's, if you could ballpark it, what that looks like today, and then, what a voice agent ideally would?
Yeah, it's a few hundred calls a day that we can, if you boil that down into an average price per person burden rate, I mean, it boils down to hundreds of thousands of dollars on an annual basis. Offsetting, that's even with paying for your cost of the voice agent, right? That's a net reduction, including all my IT costs and service costs on top of it.
Yeah, I love that. Dave, I'm going to point to you. What's, I guess, the first problem that you'd want AI to solve if you could wave a magic wand? And what, if you're already down that path, trying to wave that wand or find the wand, what makes, the problems hard today?
Yeah. I think one of our early focuses here is that predictive maintenance and helping the efficiency of keeping our equipment online, either preventing expensive repairs or making those repairs go faster by helping mechanics with identifying the right parts, helping them troubleshoot with symptoms, fault codes, things like that, and help them make better solutions faster. I think everyone's struggling with really good skilled labor mechanics, and getting them up to speed as quickly as possible and as effective as possible, I think, is a great natural place to be using AI to augment what they're doing. So that's a key focus for us, and a challenge in doing that is the data that's the past data. So in looking at behaviors of our mechanics in the past. Some of them are better typers than others, and some of them are better communicators than others. So if you go back and look at a history of work orders, there's a lot of potential rich data there that you can mine in terms of fault codes that should be in there and things like that. But maybe the fault codes aren't there, and maybe the descriptions are very terse. So that's a challenge that I think going forward is one that we can all help ourselves with by building better current data to get into the platform.
Yeah, and that came up, in our call previously. So we're going to come back to that on what does that mean? What prep work do you have to do to kind of get yourself almost ready, starting at that data layer? But ChaChi, curious from your point, like where do things stand today at Michels, and are your teams either field or equipment ops actually using it, or maybe working around them, or somewhere in between? Bring us into your world.
We're mainly in the discovery phase right now, seeing what's out there, using a lot of the internal tools like Copilot. You referenced the magic wand earlier. To me, my magic wand would be to try to educate users on what the products are and what they're actually asking for. A lot of times, I think, especially with the marketing of AI right now, they're kind of putting this broad stroke across every single product, and maybe it was machine learning before, but it's AI now. So it's confusing a lot of users of what they get, and there's a lot of shiny object syndrome of people seeing something cool, wanting it really bad, but can't really articulate what the problem is or what they're trying to solve with that solution. So we're spending a lot of our time just educating and realigning expectations in the business of what it would actually take to roll these things out. And actually get some value out of it, and also not giving POC fatigue to not only the business but my team as well. So they're not working on too many demos or researching too much product, because one of the things I think we may all agree on, or at least anybody in the IT background understands, that a POC or production feels very much the same to IT. We have to do the same amount of work, the same amount of research, same amount of conversations to gather information to see where we move forward. So again, we're in a lot of the research phase right now, which is good, because I came from a manufacturing background, working 8 years at Generac Power Systems, and there were a lot of failures there because we rushed into a lot of things. So I learned a lot from that, and so did the rest of the manufacturing industry. And I'm trying to bring that here to Michels. Not to rush into these things. Like let's take a few more weeks to talk about the goals and the pre-work, if you will.
Yeah. Let's stay on that for a second, because last time we had this conversation, in person, about a third of the group hadn't really started their journey. And I think it was a little bit of a paralysis of, almost where do we start in a solution looking for problems in a way. Are you, where would you put yourself, or Michels, in what camp would you put yourself in? Are you saying this AI thing we got to get in front of, we got to figure out how to use it? Or are you starting the other side where, hey, we have specific problems that AI may or may not solve, and maybe what, problem you're targeting? Can you kind of
definitely not in a group of use AI because it's there. That's for sure. It's definitely, if we're going to use it, it's going to be the smart way. Make sure we're actually going to use it to solve problems and help with some productivity, but also, to be really cautious. I mean, a lot of the news articles coming out now, a lot of the posts I'm seeing or updates from projects is some things are successful in a business, but now users are getting approval fatigue. Things are happening so much faster that they're getting overwhelmed with productivity, basically. Something that used to maybe take you can get 5 things approved in a week, for example. Well, now they've got 100 sitting in front of them every single day, because they've improved that manual flow of the information, but you still need the human in the loop in a lot of these things. And that can wear them down. And you start eliminating positions or moving people around, that can cause some problems. So again, we're still kind of in that, research and really have a good business case if we're going to implement or even POC a solution.
Yeah. Eric, can you comment on that? Because I know you're obviously you're the third that's not sitting in, IT specifically, but how did you guys approach, obviously you have a very specific voice agent problem to solve, but tell me about the steps you got to go there. And I know that that's just one of a handful of things you're evaluating.
Yeah, we do business cases, we do ROIs, and we do, our POCs and the same thing. But, just like ChaChi said, a lot of cases you do a proof of concept and you basically built the entire thing, right? So And some of these models you build, you just spent all of that money to build something to down. The cost is the cost, right? Then the rest of it's just computing power on top of that, right? So you have to be careful not to pull the trigger too early because it's a shiny object, right? So it's keeping people, you know, excited but not suppressed at the same time to say, hey, you know, don't be creative, don't get that entrepreneurial spirit. You know, that's what we're pushing for. You know, internally, we're given, you know, some incentives for coming up with ideas that are meaningful and impactful to the business, just to spark that, to keep that going. We're definitely going to be a leader in the industry, but we're not going to be the bleeding edge of the industry either. But a lot of what you build and you deploy with some of your partnerships, like you're building it for the industry, right? So sometimes the you know, as the contractor in the lead, you just basically paid for a product that's now sellable on the market. So you got to be careful when you get down to those you know, scenarios. But you know, we're happy with where we're at today. You know, really partnership with the OEMs, as David said earlier, is like working on fault codes. You know, what parts does it typically take to replace that fault code? Here's maybe some educational videos on how to do that. You know, how do we maximize the efficiency of technicians is really where we're at today internally in my staff. And that's the hard part, right? You know, getting technicians that want to be in the trade, everything is becoming more computer system ECM driven. So diagnostics side of the industry is really tough. So working with those teams to maximize that bandwidth and you know, maximizing the efficiency of the work that's being done. That's the goal.
Right.
We'll never get to 100%. We're not looking for AI to replace anybody. We're looking to have AI get us to 20%, or, you know, maybe even slightly less, where it's still worth it, where, you know, you still have to have that human aspect of taking it to the finish line, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you have a chance of doubling your fleet without having to also double the team and support costs with it, that sounds like the goal. But I also love that you also hit on, you know, the voice agent primarily for the recipient of the call, but you're also talking about reducing friction for the job site folks, you know, to just not fight against the phone call, but lean into it, right? Instead of trying to force them to fill out forms or whatever else that, you know, mechanics might have to be forced to do, that they're either doing or they're, you know, not you know, abiding by, right?
And it's communication, right? So communication. So a lot of times in your day, what stops first when you run out of time? It's the communication to close that loop, right? So if you can use that voice agent or that text agent to also notify them that it was done, or it's been scheduled, or it's ready to pick up, or we have it in the bay, or some of that automatically. So you take the human aspect out of that. That way it's automatically done. It frees up bandwidth, because communication is key in what we do in maximizing getting, you know, a piece of equipment back out to the field. That's the end goal, right? Keeping your equipment up and working to get that return on your investment of all of that fleet.
Yeah. Well, to the audience, just a quick pause. So, you know, if you guys have questions, again, as a reminder on where things stand today to these three, definitely chime in with comments. And again, we'll pull you in as we go. But just to shift gears a little bit, you know, David, I'll go to you on, you know, we started talking or hitting on this a little bit, but, you know, what's working, or more maybe what's not working? Is there you know, something where a moment where AI or some kind of automation like actually made a real difference for you guys, or and what was that situation? And if not, you know, what did that, you know, failures are a strong word, but maybe failed test case look like?
Yeah, we did a pilot project with a consulting company to look at our data on a particular class of equipment and look at the parts that were used for each of them over time, and look at the work orders in our system and try and discern, you know, predict what parts might be needed on future repairs. And I think it was moderately successful. But in looking at growing it, we recognize the need to get better data in the system and have a better process for all our mechanics to be using, because some are better than others. And so in all of this, I think having consistent best practices that are followed to get the right data and make sure people are using the existing tools in the right way is a big thing before you start throwing AI on top of processes that may not be completely functional, or someone wants to go buy a new piece of software because they think the software is not working well, but it turns out the operator or the mechanics, you know, not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and their data gaps, and So kind of assessing those things, assessing, what are the real pain points before trying to find a tool that's going to fix what you think the problem might be.
Yeah. Yeah. We just got a question in the chat here, which we'll come to in a second from Jeff, but here we go. We'll just jump right to it. So, just asking, anyone have a specific examples of the news that you can share, what that process looked like, and it sounds like hitting on a little bit of the data piece too of historicals. But yeah, anyone want to jump on that one?
Yeah, so this is the magic question and why it's tough to do it on your own without using OEM data, right? Because the inconsistencies based on machine type, atmosphere, application, right? We ran into the same issue with data is that, if your data is not consistent, being such a large fleet, we're all over the US, the environment is a huge impact, right? The type of application we're doing, what construction application we're doing, right? So, the question, alluding to wear rate and all that matters. A unit from Florida in mining applications versus West Texas or, the Midwest, there's a huge difference in life cycle analysis. So that's the key. That's why we're leveraging a lot on manufacturer support to start the basis of it, and then applying. We're going to use our data to apply over the top of it to basically build those models, right?
Yeah, along the same lines, ChaChi, can you speak to sort of that? Because I know you're in that discovery phase, but a big part of your focus is also that sort of data, foundational layer. So can you kind of speak a little bit more about what work you guys are doing? Maybe we would explore this predictive maintenance side, but sort of the prerequisite work that you've been thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, this is a struggle, right? You go back to the data. Eric makes a great point. Trying to gather that information from an OEM, if they're even willing to share it, because most likely they're going to want to sanitize it in some way. That's a really difficult thing to solve for, because what people don't realize is that these things are built on context and training. So you've got to have data that you can put at it, or people within the business that really understand that data and are making decisions for the business based on that data to help train that model. That I can't just pull a data scientist off the street and say, go train this model for equipment. They've got to understand the context of equipment, what the needs are, how the supply chain is, what does the rental fleet look like, all of those things, the integration points, the OEM integration points, all of those things. Those are the discussions that we keep getting into. And then immediately, most of the business will come back with, you're slowing the process down. What are you doing? We just want to try this thing out. And a lot of these things, again, it's just this shiny wrapper over a RAG application that's using, one of the public LLMs like ChatGPT or Azure's private ChatGPT or even Copilot, and they're just, giving you that front end portal. And yes, some of those vendors do come with their own kind of knowledge of all their customers and what they need, and that does help and maybe speed up a lot with IT on where you start. But even those vendors got to admit that you're also going to need that input from the business itself and how they do it their way, which every I'm sure every one of your customers has a unique way of doing certain things that you got to try to fit into any of these platforms. So again, going back to the data, it's so important to talk about that structure, not only how it's going to live moving forward for BI dashboards and reporting, but also how are you going to train it and vet that information over time. You can't stop vetting it. Even if it's working great for a few months, every once in a while you should audit it. Make sure that data that's coming out is accurate. Like you really would any other system, right? The more confident you get in it, the longer you can go without auditing, but you've got to have all of those things in place that people think just magically disappear when you enable AI.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to actually see if Jeff's, there we go. Hey, Jeff. We wanted to invite you on here because I think the sort of sound like you were getting at the predictive maintenance side a little bit. I know that's like something that I think 9 out of 10 folks immediately go to when thinking about AI. So hoping that maybe you can expand on that a little bit and see if we can dig into that predictive maintenance side a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I'm always looking to pick smart people's brains. My challenge has always been, I think everybody's touched on, is the data integrity. If your history is spotty and not consistent, then it's really hard. Your your forecasting, your extrapolation is not going to be very accurate. So I was just wondering if anybody had found a way to do that. I do like the OEM. Yeah, it's kind of like anything whenever you're setting prices for your equipment or preventive maintenance schedules, you kind of go with a very conservative number, or the conservative data source, and then work from there once you get some of the history. So I was curious how that had worked for everybody.
Yeah, some of the stuff we're beta testing today is exactly that, using the OEMs to basically give us a fault code, and then working on knowing that, okay, at this much fuel consumption, this many hours, this many miles, we're actually getting more away from miles and shifting more towards hours only. And then basically using that to schedule, parts ordering and and shop time. That's some of the biggest thing, is parts availability and hours just available in a shop, or scheduling them mobile, so we can take it out of service before the unit goes down. That's really where we're working on today. That's a challenge in itself, just because of the inconsistency of data, right? It's really, really challenging. And then some of our biggest heartache is that we're a company built on acquisitions. Being a large publicly traded company, we're always acquiring companies. So their data structure from the day we buy them is completely different than anything we've worked on and standardized, right? So, as we integrate those companies over a year, 2 years, depending on what the timing is, that's when we can start standardizing those. So we have to basically isolate that data. We can't put it in our data lake because of the fact that it's not consistent. It's not being managed, or not that it's incorrect. It's just not in the way that we can digest it, right?
Has anybody found a way to collect the data without the manual input? From the once you can kind of take that manual entry out of the equation, then I think your data is going to be more accurate. I'm curious to see how everybody has approached that.
I would just say it depends on your data, right? There's some OCR software out there where you can pull in some images of forms or those kind of things. I mean, Ben mentioned this. I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, and I saw it at the conference that Gearflow has a way to put it in through your voice, using the voice tool to enter data into the system and those kind of things. So it's going to depend on your data set, what you're trying to get in there and how. But unfortunately, the truth is, so I've only been at Michels for almost 20 years. My first time at a large-scale construction company has been at other company. The construction is like 8 to 10 years behind on technology. So I know there's a lot of companies struggling with these legacy processes, and it's going to be a lot of uplift for IT to get that legacy data into a more current gen platform. So that is definitely a struggle that I think all of us are going to go through during this evaluation period.
Yeah, and we are seeing some OEMs starting to make strides in this area too. We're a big Caterpillar shop, and they came out with this AI assistant just before ConExpo, and so we're starting to experiment with that. It's the idea is that we'll help mechanics with identifying parts, how-tos, come up with instructions on things, and help them be more effective. It's early days for that solution, and so like a lot of things, you got to have some patience, but try it out and validate what it's telling you, and don't just accept it.
I'm curious. I think, Jeff, while you're on here too, because I don't know if this is a part of what you're getting at as well, but there's the making sure you have all the data in one place, but the other side is a bit of a change of behavior. It might be a catch-22 with the way a lot of the data is getting entered into these systems very manually. But one prime example within predictive maintenance is that you have obviously your mean time to repair, and that's largely measured on the work order level. And this is just one use case that came up recently with us, largely at the work order level. But a lot of times a work order is a catch-all for multiple different jobs that might take a day and might take 6 months to finish. So therefore, your average time to repair just got a little messy because that work order stayed open for 6 months. So as any of this, I guess I'll pose it to all four of you guys on the data question, is it also, are you starting to think about changing behavior on how you're sort of capturing data? In this example, maybe even like having a work order for every job as an example, so you have kind of better outputs to learn from, or are we not even there yet because we're still trying to just, have one place to sort of access it?
We trend our mean time to repair. We track how long does it take to close the work orders, and then we have to manage. And we'll see an uptick in the mean time to repair, and then we'll dig in a little bit, and I'm like, oh, okay, y'all left this open over multiple jobs, so we manage that and we watch that. It takes management, but yeah, we have work orders for each job.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. ChaChi, David, Eric, how are you guys handling any of that? Has there been any change in behavior on how you want data entered to make better use of it? Specifically, maybe even on the predictive maintenance side.
Yeah, I mean, we started with standardizing just like the core pieces, whether it's cost codes and cost types internally, repair codes, categorying classes of equipment and all that. We've been working on that for years, but without the standardization of that, you start then looking at repair costs on categories of equipment. They're out of whack, and you look at it and it's like, oh well, there's a piece of equipment that doesn't belong in that category. And it throws everything off. And you look at, repair times and cost by repair codes, right? Then you're like, okay, well, exactly what Jeff said. They left that open or did another work, type of work on that same work line, right? So it's so hard. And that's why it's all about your standard operating procedures. If you don't have a standard way and one way to do it, it's very hard to do it that way. But as you get in a larger and larger corporation and it scales, it becomes even harder to regulate that, right? So, we have people that have worked here for 40 years, and we've had people that worked here for 4 days, right? So you have that learning curve, and sometimes it's a new process, a new application, so everybody's under a learning curve, right? So it takes time to iron that out as well, right? We just standardized FMISs roughly 2 years ago. So, everyone was working on, say, 5 different platforms. Now they're working on one. So now some people know the platform and then some people don't. So they're not sure. They're like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to fill that out, right? So you have to create mandatory fields, or sometimes we restrict it by drop down. So you can only pick one that is formatted in that fashion, right? So where we can engineer a control or standardization, we're definitely pushing for that. There's no question. But we still have electronic forms that are done by hand, and it's a free text field or a checkbox, and you're relying on the end user. And wherever you you rely on the end user to do it manually is where we set ourselves up for failure, because it's going to, there's typos every day.
Yeah, the bottom line for me is AI is not going to fix your data problem. It's not going to fix your people problem. You still need the people to put in good data, and you still need a good data architecture. But where AI will help you is it can help you by guiding you on how that data architecture should be, maybe how you tag the data from historic data that's just brought in and kind of evaluated and those kind of things, or how you even do some of the naming sequences in those fields or the naming standards. And then for the people, it's just, helping educate them, the overlay when they're entering information in the field, the AI is tracking that and it tells them, hey, that's not the type of information you should put in that field. You should probably improve it with this recommendation or that recommendation, or even to Eric's point, you get some of those newer people into an organization. To me, AI, that's what AI was built for. You train it on how your company does the thing it does and the way it does it. And then they've got an assistant right next to them that can guide them on how to get things done in the organization. Those are the entry points to me that people should be more focused on AI. I think everybody's running to the finish line trying to find that perfect solution. And you're going to have to layer these in a lot slower than you think, and for good reason.
Yeah, and for us, as we were starting to do more analytics on the data we found that past maintenance, we didn't have enough categories on the type of work being done, so it was all just kind of in general buckets. And so we went back and had someone go in and categorize the different types of work being done, preventive maintenance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and things that could be a drop down in the future. But we wanted to have that data in the back for the last few years, so that going forward we could, when something is there's an issue, we can go back and look and see what types of maintenance have been done on this asset or this class of assets. And so sometimes you need to bite the bullet and go, work on your past data, and you can do some things to help on that.
Josh, you hit on an important part too, the people side. So on this topic of thanks, Jeff. So this topic of what's working, not working, and sort of like the prep work to get to crawl before we start walking and running. So how are you starting to lay that groundwork with the people and how you communicate this and how you sort of start small with your folks, so there's not this sort of fear that IT is coming to automate my job away?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that many people are as afraid of AI taking their job away, and any that are afraid of it, I always spin it on them that AI is here to take away the task, not the role. All right, it's here to make all those mundane things that everybody hates doing all day, from managing your calendar to figuring out which emails are important and priority to what's the key information that I put into a paragraph that has to do with this piece of equipment and what do I need to do with it, those kind of things. Like, to me, that's where AI is coming from. So again, every question you ask, I can always probably bring it back to just educating the user and making sure they understand what they're asking for, and that don't fall for all the marketing and the brainwashing. That let's really, one of my favorite things basically to say to the business is, come to IT with your problems, not your solutions. Everybody's coming with this cool thing I saw, or this demo I saw, or this video I saw at CES for Caterpillar's next autonomous vehicle, or whatever the thing is. And I immediately go, well, what are you trying to solve with that? That's what I want to focus on, because a lot of them don't realize there's a lot of things we can do in IT that we don't have to go out and buy the new thing. We can use the systems we already have. And obviously I'm in a unique situation too, because we're rolling out a new ERP system. So we're getting to kind of reset the business and how they interact with systems and data. And then the next big one after that will be PMIS. So I'm taking some big chunks of landscape and being able to reset our expectations from the business, and also make sure they're well educated on them owning getting that data into the system. It doesn't matter how much I spend on these systems. If you're not putting in that data consistently and accurately, then there's going to be a problem on the other end of that system. So focusing on that process and how to get that data in there. And then our job as IT for continuous improvement is, how do we speed up that process, make it easier for them so they don't have to. So those are the kind of things we're tossing around.
Mm-hmm. Eric, knowing your team super well at this point, you guys move like a small company and you're publicly traded. So tell me like a little bit about, culturally what makes Primoris unique and how you guys, adopt technology, specifically some of the bleeding edge stuff that is still a little bit test casey, like the one you brought up.
Yeah, I mean, we budget for it, that's for sure. We have to work within our means, right? But not to say that hasn't come without fault. I mean, I think the general theme of this has been data integrity and structure. But, if you don't have a good platform to store that data and what you use to pull that data out of, whether it's Databricks or, whatever platform you want to use, if it's not built right, it will just be unreliable, especially when you start computing with AI over the top. The amount of bandwidth it takes to do that and compute power is massive. So you have to start with a strong foundation, right? Mm-hmm. ChaChi said it best. Everyone wants to come up with a result and say, this is what we want, but how you get there, what you actually want, you have to understand that, right? Because we've changed platforms a few times, and all that does is stop everything. You reset, you're restarting again, and it's always constant reflux or change in direction just based on how we're storing that data. And honestly, Ben, you say we move very fast, and we're very nimble. We push entrepreneur spirit on this side, but the fact of the matter is it's never fast enough for anybody. The conceptual idea and the go-to-market speed is never fast enough for anybody. Like, internal business customers are like, where is this? Why is it taking so long? And it's just because everybody wants it at a different speed, right? So I will say we do a lot of changes. The good thing is, if it's anything with the fleet management, it takes just a few people to make that decision to get that rolling. Sometimes, there's a lot of red tape to go through on some of these organizations to make the decisions. the good thing is that on the Primoris side is, I have a lot of support from the C-suite on down. So that helps to expedite that exponentially, right? But if you put a good business case together, a good ROI case, that gets your green light for your POC pretty quickly, right? So that's the key. Be prepared, know what you want, and try to get that deliverable based on something that's measurable. Because a lot of times we ask for things, it's like, well, how will we ever even measure the value of that? Other than it's a shiny object in the room and it looks cool and it's gonna, it's got all the bells and whistles, but a lot of this stuff has bells and whistles. If you don't use it, it's useless, right?
Yep. And what about like on the people side? So you mentioned, I mean, I know you guys typically will start with, a small pilot group or maybe a committee of some kind. And then, so walk me through like you kind of talked about the evaluation, looking at a problem, make sure the data is there. But then when rubber hits the road, you actually have to start using it in real life. Like, how do you get that? How do you tee yourself up for success there at a big organization like yourself, and what's working?
It's always community driven or committee driven. Sorry. And we always have an executive sponsor that's responsible for it. So, whether they use my support, but then I'll bring in, if it's my procurement team, they lead on it, right? Because they're going to own it. They need to manage the process, the deliverable, and then they become super users. Then we can scale and train and I diagnose problems early and often, and then we can bring in support. Also cuts down on cost on my end, and then it allows that team to take ownership of it, right? Because we do, we have business partners on our IT and project management, stuff like that come in and help us. But if we don't take ownership of that as it goes, they're just going to deliver you something and great. And then we look at it a year later and it's like, well, why is no one really using it? Or they use a quarter of that software. And a lot of the stuff, not even AI, but just in tech alone, a lot of our softwares, we just barely scratch the surface on what we even use it for. There's a lot of capabilities in what we have today that we don't even maximize before we go and spend money on another, software application. That's the tricky part, right? And I think ChaChi said earlier, is like understanding what we have available to us today and what it does, right? ChatGPT and Copilot do a lot of things, and we don't even use that to the fullest capability. We do use it to check, like, you can ask simple questions and data. If you put your data in a database where it's like, how do I request a vehicle? Well, it'll pull up the SOP and it'll highlight it for you and show you all that. Can I share my field pin? Absolutely not. But here's where it's referencing, policies and procedures. And those are like immediately impacted the business by putting them out there. That's where AI can use immediate value. You can do that, add value immediately. There's softwares like Notebook LM. You'd have, safety topics or, policy and procedures, and you want to teach staff to do it, not just have them read a 40-page document. Well, Notebook LM will just create a podcast for you, right? And then you listen to the podcast, right? So things like that, where it adds a ton of value immediately, very, very little investment, it's stuff where we should be focusing on today while we continue to work on and refine the predictive models and all of that, in the background, right?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems with AI right now too is how easy it is to use. It's ignorance is bliss for IT. The fact that users couldn't go out there and figure these things out without involving IT actually kind of helped with the process of them involving IT. You can literally see, it's the first tool in the world. You can literally ask it how to use it and it can tell you, right? So it's like, if you're having, problems, you're trying to make an agent, you're trying to set up automation, just ask it how I do it. And it walks you through step-by-step how to do it. So it's just funny to me, is like, we create these tools to try to make our jobs better. And it's actually causing more problems in IT, because people can, we push people to Copilot a lot because that's our private world, right? Like, hey, you want to test something out, go do it with Copilot, because they don't realize the power of that tool that they already have. And they can point a contract at it because that's within our SharePoint environment or wherever we store any of this data. It can connect to that. So go do that. Well, they see they can do something by themselves, and immediately it's like, why can't IT roll this out for 3,000 users? It's like, I just because you're smart enough to go in there and figure it out, there's a whole, learning and development that I have to go through. I got to put out training sessions, documentation. Now, how do they interact with IT when they need support? There's all these things that are just IT 101 that people never want to talk about. They just want to rush into that solution and not still do what they've always had to do with anything you're rolling out in an organization. Talk about the fundamentals.
Dave, I saw you smirking, but we're going to pause here for Sean's question.
Sure.
which is an unbiased, very a fantastic question from Sean. So I'll let one of you guys take.
How much did you pay him for this question?
Yeah, Sean, I'll get you back later. But yeah, question. I mean, it sounds like a lot of fleet teams are their mind goes right to predictive maintenance, but then parts, obviously, the manual, repetitive, transactional nature of it. I'll let any of you guys speak to any work you've done there or plans to.
I'll just say really quick, I wouldn't trust the thing to automate half the stuff internally, let alone start connecting it to an OEM and start ordering parts off of it and making financial decisions. I think we're that far away from that end game of like, just go do your thing. But just, frankly speaking, in my experience in IT, there was very rarely anything that we fully automated without a human being involved. And I don't see that changing even with AI for quite some time, that we're always going to want certain checkpoints before we just commit to ordering parts or anything like that. So it depends on how deep you want to go with automation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your point, the human in the loop, it's really about don't automate the decision-making, just automate everything else to make faster decisions and actions, right?
Yeah, I always say don't build AI to think for you. Build AI to think like you should be your goal.
Yeah, only if we had a software that as we ordered parts and it was always just in time, that it would tell us like, hey, we recommend you to put this many on your shelf in a week, because like, hey, how do we, that task adds up to be a bunch. So now that should be a stock order, or also inverse, like, hey, this is on a stale inventory. Right, Ben? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I know. It's like, man, there should really be a company hosting shop talks and kind of doing something about this.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we get a lot of benefit out of our AI, and honestly, we could use it even much in more depth than we do today. But that's the basis of what we just recently switched our parts team over to. Why we moved to Gearflow is for that exact reason, right? That investment alone, not to mention what we're doing on the dispatch side, is paying for what we're doing, right?
Yeah. I mean, our approach there is really, the thought is parts might not be the biggest budget, but it's definitely the highest probably support cost just because of the transactional nature of it and the implications of not having the parts you need, downstream of a broken down machine. So it's the most complex place to start, but it feels like it's kind of ripe for this type of technology. But David,
I was just nodding my head when Eric was talking about getting our people to fully utilize the tools that they have and ensuring that across the different work groups and roles is a real challenge. It's people, process, and technology, and getting those first two right is a challenge. But on the other hand, you also want to foster innovation that can come with AI, as ChaChi was saying. So we're going to start a hackathon contest process here, and having a process in place where people can submit ideas, and then a team kind of vets them for value and effort, and you go try some things and see what kind of potential return you could get, and then go forward with possibly implementing them. But that rollout of you can have people trying little things and they work for them, but getting that organizational support around them to roll them out in a bigger way, as ChaChi was saying, is definitely a big consideration.
Yeah, some of the struggles we've had with that is that people want to go do it without including IT. So then they start downloading softwares that aren't that put the company at cyber risk, so that are blocked. So we have a process to do that exact same thing. But there's a lot of free AI stuff out there that you have to be very cautious of, because whatever data you put in there becomes public data, right? So that's the biggest reservation we have, to make sure we do it the correct way internally.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, AI is changing so drastically week to week. It's in my mind. I always think we're starting to get our feet on the ground to understand a direction to at least look at, not even start walking towards, just look in that direction. And then next week, now Claude's the biggest thing in the whatever their version of the co-work agenting is now the big thing that everybody should be moving to and get away from OpenClaw. It's like so we're always trying to stay on the edge of innovation so that we know where we can kind of focus and go to. It's just man, the market is saturated. It's very difficult for even larger teams to keep up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to understand what you want out of them too, because each one has its own skill, like major skill set that is good for. So understanding what your intent is of what to use that software. Obviously Copilot's integrated within all the Microsoft stuff, right? It works great. It's embedded in those softwares, whereas that information won't necessarily be in a ChatGPT. But then, ChatGPT is a little bit better reviewing contracts. And so, Claude does a lot of, coding, and they all do basic coding. So it's kind of, you just have to understand what we want out of them and what that core is. And that's from an organizational standpoint, we pretty much use Copilot, but there's a group of us that use ChatGPT as well, but it's under an enterprise level one, not the free one, because you can't put public, private data in a publicly traded company on the open market. Doesn't really bode well.
Now, Justin has the question that every OEM is terrified of. But similar to what Bragan was asking, kind of getting at the point of cross-referencing, and I know OEMs do their best to try to, make sure you're buying parts from them, but curious if any of you guys have started exploring, how to open up sort of vendor access, maybe using some of this tech to do some of the cross-referencing. If that's, Justin, what you're getting at, take it. Or if this is on your radar at all.
No, it's definitely on our radar. We use it today because that's the key, and it's also when we put RFPs out, what are you paying for? And there's certain cases where we know we pay more to go through the OEM because we want those parts from the OEM. But then there's certain things that we're absolutely fine with using, secondary markets for. Not to make a sales plug out of Gearflow, but that's what we use Gearflow for.
Yeah.
I'm not being paid by Gearflow.
I love Justin.
In that case, Eric.
Go ahead, David. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was to say, in that case, Eric is the AI helping that workflow by going out to the market and looking at reviews and kind of market data on how well third-party products fit for replacing OEM parts?
No, right now it's just relative table relationship data, and then helping us actually bid out orders, and then we do set our pricing in the system, so it knows why. And really, it's more managing our procurement teams to understand when and why and how we did something, and knowing, and as a check and a balance to make sure that our procurement, it can be a dicey group, so we got to make sure that you keep them honest, right? That's the opportunity where vendors can skew the procurement team, whether it's a relationship. Sometimes it's just they brought in donuts for the office, things like that. We got to make sure we're being best stewards of the company, and having a fiduciary duty to make sure we're making the best expenditure for the company, right? So that's kind of what we're building. We built a framework to allow them the box to work with it, right? And then we, as an oversight in the group that owns this team, we make sure that we only put things in that box that we allow or have embedded, right? Whether it's a vendor or pricing or that particular piece of equipment or parts or anything of that sort.
Mm-hmm. I'm just keeping an eye on time. I do want to save a little bit of time here. So we'll do one more question to each of you guys, and then make sure there's time for anyone that's chiming in. If you guys have last questions that you want to ask these three folks, now is definitely the time. So I guess, Eric, I'll start with you. What's kind of more so looking ahead? What's one problem or thing that you're really bullish on that you're excited that you think AI will solve and make a tangible impact for you guys, and have you taken steps towards that already?
Really the voice agent is probably what we have our most eggs in that basket today. There are things on the market today that already you can deliver on. It's the hard part is building something that's integrated in your system, because what we don't want is to have, I can stand up a voice agent tomorrow, but if it's not integrated and doesn't have API connections with certain tables and databases, then now we just digitized a manual process to make it manually again to get that information in there, right? So that's probably our biggest bang for our buck that we'll see this year. And partly is we slowed that down just a tad bit, just to I would rather that be integrated in an existing software than create another software that everybody has to work, right? So we spend a lot of time to condense softwares and applications we're using, and now you look in the rearview mirror and you're like, wow, we just added another 3 more, not realizing it's like, but it was easier, right? So that's the big goal. And also some of these other companies and softwares that we use today are now putting AI to the front. So instead of developing something on our own outside of what our corporate structure, we're basically now partnering with those software companies to say, okay, let us beta test it, let us help you develop it, and we can grow this together, which is also something you can put to market, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. David, I'll kick the same question to you. What's kind of one thing?
I think probably 2 things. One is kind of the big data back end of helping our management teams make better decisions about rebuild versus buy, and using all the best data they can to continue to make those good capital decisions and repair decisions. And then in parallel with that is tools to make our operators and mechanics as effective as they can be. And so there's a lot of small things that AI is helping with, the natural language inputs and things like that. So kind of looking at both of those areas.
Awesome. What about you, ChaChi? Anything come to mind you're most excited about or bullish on for Michels, knowing you're kind of in the discovery phase?
I mean, I'm for sure bullish on AI in some capacity, probably more of a focused on, helping, because one of the biggest issues we have is just speed to get employees kind of spun up on the Michels way of doing things. And if you had basically an executive assistant for every employee that could tell you everything you need to know about Michels, from how to get PTO off to how do I order equipment for my job site, and it could walk them through that process, I think that would help a lot of people, because we spend the majority of our time in the first 6 months, me being a newer employee, I experienced this, just spinning people up and teaching them about Michels. It's such a large organization, and it's private, so there's not a lot of public information out there on it, that most employees don't learn about Michels until they're being interviewed. So it's extremely interesting. And then number 2 is what I saw at the conference with your product, is that voice integration. To me, if you tell me to put the crystal ball out and look into the future, I think everything is going to be voice activated. Even a lot of these open claw setups and these agent setups are through voice activation, talking to it through WhatsApp or some other kind of vocal command to go do a thing for you. I mean, what mechanic out there wouldn't want to just yell across the room and say, I'm working on this Caterpillar, I need this part ordered, it needs to be by next Tuesday, and they didn't even have to touch the computer? Every one of them would be excited about that. So how do we get them to that point? Because I look at some of these platforms and I see a bunch of fields, and it's like, great, now the guy's got to take off his gloves, go grab a mouse, click through all these fields. Why can't he put exactly what he wants in one paragraph, and the AI extrapolates that into the system and gets him to the point where he's tracking all that? And I think that's kind of where I saw Gearflow going, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Why Michael was interested in evaluating that deeper.
Yeah.
Well, to piggyback on that too, the AI can also say, "Oh, but I need to ask you this question as well."
Yes.
This is
right.
data field. Get that information immediately, right then and there, instead of 17 emails going back and forth or phone calls. They didn't. Hey, I need to snap a picture. Let me snap this picture right here while I'm here. Or when do you need it? How long do you need it for? How long was that? Or whatever.
Or that's on back order. It'll take 3 months, but this rental agency has 2 of these if you want to get that over to the job site instead. Like,
absolutely
linking into those other systems to offer guidance.
Right. Yeah, it feels like it's that catch-22 conundrum, right? Where we can track more than we ever have been before, but to get it, you require guys on the job to do things they don't necessarily want to do, so they resort to phone calls and emails. And it's almost like you have to choose one or the other traditionally, but I think AI opened up the opportunity to not have to have that trade-off. Well, I'll leave it with one last question to you, ChaChi, but if you're, what's one thing you would tell a fleet manager who's trying to figure out where to start with AI? Where would that be?
I mean, I would encourage them to jump on the internal Copilot and just start asking questions. Like, literally, whatever you're thinking about with AI, just start asking it questions. I always push people to Copilot in the organization because it's the one tool that's kind of can be used for everything right now, and it's in a private instance. It's tied to your account. Like, we're more comfortable with you playing around in that area. Even if you want to ask it about Claude, like go do that. And, I saw a couple messages here, and Eric mentioned it a little bit about not having a private instance of ChatGPT and going to public. A lot of people don't realize that ChatGPT is in Copilot. You can literally select it from the drop-down menu up in the top right. So even internally, a lot of people are like, well, I want to use ChatGPT, but we only have Copilot. I tell them go select it, and they start using it. So that's what I would tell anybody, not even just a fleet manager, anyone trying to get into AI, just start using it and seeing how it can impact your day. And the more confused you are, the more you should ask that tool itself how to make it better. If I was going to ask you this question again, which way should I present it to you? What things should I think about when I'm asking you a question? Like even down to that rudimentary level, you'd be shocked how much faster you'll learn about those tools just doing that.
Final thoughts, Eric, David?
I'm good.
Nope, all good here. I mean, ChaChi hit it best. Like every day it's changing, right? So this is we don't even know what we don't know yet, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is an awesome conversation. Thank you very much, the three of you guys, for being a part of it and driving this. I think based off the text I'm getting on the side and things, this is definitely well received and people want more of it. So if you guys do want more of it, for those that are still tuning in, please let me know if you have ideas of right people, topics that you're most interested in, but know that we're going to be doing this every month and really trying to foster more of these conversations. So thank you all for joining and kind of tune in for the next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.